Happy Thanksgiving, everyone. Thank you for joining me today. In honor of Thanksgiving and the giving of gratitude, let's begin our satsang together with a chant, an invocation to the Guru. And this is such a sweet chant. This is the hymn to Brahma. And as we chant this, let's all take a second and a moment to just express our deep, loving gratitude to the Guru for all of his blessings, for all of his grace, for descending to earth to show us all our own true potential. Guru Brahma, Guru Vishnu, Guru Deva Maheshwara, Guru Sakshat Param Brahma, Tasmai Shri Guruve Namaha. Brahmanandam Paramasukadam Kevalam Jnanamurtim Danvatitam Gaganasadrisham Tattvamasya Didakshiyam Ekam Nityam Vimhalamachalam Sarvade Sakshibhutam Bhavatitam Tribunarahitam Sadgurum Tam Namami. Full of bliss, giving joy transcendent, of higher knowledge the abode, dual no more, clear as the heavens, known to all as thou art that. He is pure, permanent, unmoving, the everlasting seer of all, far, far beyond qualities and thought. Guru Lord, I bow to thee. Guru Lord, I bow to thee. Let's just feel for a moment the presence of the Guru, of the blessings of God. Trying to feel a sincere spark of gratitude for their blessings in our lives. Teach us to spend as happily and freely for others as we spend for ourselves. Teach us not to love thy gifts more than thee, the true giver of all gifts. For to think more of thy gifts than of thee is to separate ourselves from thee. Those who share thy gifts freely with others, even as thou sharest the gift of life and consciousness with them, find themselves one with the life and consciousness of all. This is the closing paragraphs of the prayer, Whispers from Eternity 190. Teach me to spend for others as I spend for myself. And I thought this was both an appropriate and a somewhat humorous selection for today being Black Friday in 2020. I was just talking with my friend Sai Ganesh before this began that the phenomenon of Black Friday has really mushroomed in the last decade. Even in my limited awareness in my lifetime, it has seemingly exploded. You know, now with the advent of online shopping, you can spend all day shopping from the comfort of your own home now. You don't even have to go out and fight the great currents of the masses to get into your favorite stores and, you know, risk your life in bodily harm against other people vying for a 5-foot wide flat screen TV. And I was also joking with my friend that maybe the chant I should do to introduce this topic should be "Desire my great enemy" instead, but I thought it would be sweet to invoke the Guru. But I wanted to talk a little bit about the necessity to cultivate true gratitude and also generosity. One of my favorite quotes around the topic of generosity comes from Swami Kriyananda. I believe in his book, Living Wisely, Living Well. But to be honest, I forgot where I read it. But he said that generosity is the prerogative of kings. And we all are trying to learn to become kings of our own hearts, once again, kings of our own soul nature. And being generous is a great way to remind ourselves of our own inherent nobility. Because when we give to others, we expand ourselves. And like this prayer says, we put ourselves in tune with the consciousness of God, who is the giver of all gifts. And so giving is such a beautiful attitude, such a wonderful practice to really focus on in this, our holy Christmas season. Because let's face it, Thanksgiving was yesterday. So the holiday season has begun. I was joking with another friend last night that my family tradition for years over Thanksgiving, after a large feast with many friends, I had the incredibly good karma that as everyone else was cleaning up, because I play the cello, my cello teacher, myself, and my other brothers who play music would all just play music to entertain everybody. And so I never had to wash any dishes. I just got to play music, which was always such a treat and a privilege for me. But because we would play for an hour or an hour and a half, we'd usually work our way through our classical music repertoire, some of Swami Kriyananda's music, and then we'd kick off the holiday season by starting to play some Christmas carols in like 4-part cello arrangements, which was a lot of fun. And so in my mind, the moment the Thanksgiving dinner is being put in the refrigerator, it's the Christmas season. And so because of that, I've been really thinking about gratitude and thankfulness from Thanksgiving, but also then the spirit of charity, the spirit of giving. And in one of my favorite movies about a saint, which I would highly recommend to anyone, it's called I Prefer Heaven, the story of Filippo Neri. And he was an Italian saint. They called him like the first real saint of Rome. And it's an incredible story told over this 2 1.5 hour part biofilm that's just so touchingly done. And his story is he wanted to serve Christ, and he thought that his mission was to sail from Rome to India, actually of all places, where there were missionary works taking root, Christian missionary works. And he felt that that was his calling. But every time he tried to ask a superior to give him authorization to go and become a missionary, they denied him because he was old and he was like a mountain hermit and wasn't sort of young and of the nobility and didn't have power within the organization. And so he found himself stuck in Rome. And beautifully, his Dharma found him. There's a lot of wonderful lessons to learn from the lives of saints, and Filippo Neri is the same. But his excuse me. His Dharma found him, and his Dharma was basically to become the father, spiritually, of all the orphans of Rome. And he discovered many suffering children and took them under his wing and nurtured them spiritually, but also personally and with their education. And he created like a haven of children, and he helped raise them and taught them, and it's a beautiful film. But you know, there's drama, and the Catholic Church doesn't understand who he is, and as he becomes more and more saintly, people are trying to prosecute him. The old story. But it's wonderfully told in that film. And at the end of it, when someone asks him, what's your philosophy? What's your creed? He says, I only have one rule. and it's charity. And it was so sweet because he was such a saintly man. And the film did a beautiful job of exploring how over the course of his incarnation, his heart just became so broad by human compassion, by sympathy for others, that the boundaries of his heart were bursting open with Christ's love by the end. And it was just all encompassed in that one law. My only rule is charity. And that's really what we all can practice now in this holiday season. Charity, giving, mercy, gratitude, generosity. And the joy that comes from that is something that we can all discover for ourselves. One of my favorite things about spirituality and about this special dispensation that Yogananda brought is he didn't bring dogma. He never said, believe this or burn in hell. He said, if you don't believe me, just try it. Try even just a little bit and see what happens. See for yourself. And so I invite you to see for yourself what happens if today, instead of focusing on what you can gain from life, instead of focusing on what you're going to acquire, on what you're going to get, focus maybe instead on what you're going to give. This whispers from eternity, teach me to spend for others as I spend for myself. What a appropriate, timely, and courageous prayer to take on Black Friday. Could you literally do that? Could you literally spend for others today as you would spend for yourself? I invite you to try and to see what happens to your consciousness. Maybe it's a simple thing as to go through and make a list of 10 people who you'd like to give a meaningful gift to. Something as simple as that. Already now you are expanding the boundaries of your own heart and opening yourself to the flow of universal love. Swami Kriyananda apparently said once that if you have a desire to buy something or to acquire something, acquire it and then give it away. And you'll discover that in giving it, you still have the joy. And it's actually a joy doubled because it's a joy shared. And so that's a very, to do that entirely throughout the holiday season would be a wonderful practice. Maybe not one that's entirely practical, depending upon your needs and your life, but it's certainly an interesting ideal. And it's something that we can all practice in whatever way is meaningful to us. I have had some really fun experiences with generosity and with giving. And I have discovered that the more freely I learn to give of my heart, not necessarily just my material goods or my finances, but to be generous in spirit, to be generous with all the gifts that God has bestowed upon me, then I discover that the world smiles back and Divine Mother seems to drop fruit in my lap when I need it. There was a wonderful experience I had when I was younger. Of all things, I got into shooting shotguns. I was doing competitive trap shooting, and I really enjoyed it. And I was in Ananda Living Wisdom School at the time, and we did a school fundraiser, and every student was supposed to gain sponsors to sponsor them to do something. Normally it would be like running or bicycling, or so you'd call the sponsor and you'd say, hey, I'm going to try and run 20 miles to raise funds for my school. Will you sponsor me? And they might say, I'll give you $5 for every mile. And then you're out there huffing and puffing and you're going, if I can get just 2 more miles, I'm going to raise another $300. And so, it's really fun and everyone puts out a lot of energy and it's this very community effort. It's a lot of fun. But that one year I thought, what the heck, I'm going to shoot shotguns. And I called people and I said, I'm going to go trap shooting. And I want you to sponsor me for how many of the clay discs I can hit. And people went for it because it was ridiculous and it was fun. And I got people to sponsor me. And I went out to the range and I told the owner what I was doing. And the owner was a very sweet and very generous man. And I told him that I was raising money for my school. And he said, that's amazing. And so he gave me some free use of his range, which enabled me to shoot twice as much as I thought I was going to. And so unfortunately, the poor people who sponsored me ended up having to cough up quite a bit more cash than they thought they would. And coincidentally, I ended up raising the most money out of anybody in the school, which was quite funny. But because I raised so much money and I had so much fun doing it, I mean, it was a 16-year-old's dream to go to a shotgun range and shoot a shotgun for 2.5 hours and raise hundreds of dollars for your school, that the next weekend, I went back to that range, but I wanted to give something in thanks because he had given to me just freely from his own heart out of the desire to want to help and support what I was doing. And now I just want to paint the picture for a second. This is out in the foothills of Northern California near Grass Valley, and there it's pretty rough and tumble out there sometimes, and I'm talking about a shotgun range. So the people who populate, this watering hole are not like necessarily the people who studied art history in college. Let's just say it that way. But I was asking myself, what can I do to express my gratitude? What do I have that is of value that I can give away? And I didn't have money. I didn't have anything that I thought he would really value. I thought, well, I'll make him a card. And I tried to paint a little card of me shooting a shotgun at his range and being grateful. And it was comically bad, but at least I tried. And then I thought, but no, there's still more I can do. I thought, if I can't paint, which truly I couldn't, but I realized, but I can play music. I've been playing the cello for over a decade. I'm pretty good. And maybe I'll bring my cello and I'll offer to play some music for him as a token of my gratitude. So I got in the car. My brother took me because I couldn't drive at the time. And we drove out to this range, and I brought my little hand-painted card and my cello. And we got to the range, and I get out, and everyone's asking, what's that? It's a cello. And no one even knew, a lot of people didn't even know what that was. But what was so touching was I got there, and it turned out the man who owned the range and his best friend both not only knew what the cello was, but it was their favorite classical instrument. And they had no idea that I played, and I had no idea that they loved classical music. And so I gave him the card, and I said, I brought my cello, and I wanted to express my gratitude, and so I'd like to play some music for you. And so I set up on their picnic table, and I started playing Bach cello suites. And after the first song, a ceasefire was called over the range, literally. Someone went and told everybody to stop shooting, and every single person at the range came and gathered round, and I played Bach for about 30 minutes straight. I just marched through my Bach pieces. And by the time I was finished, the whole range was almost in mute silence. And when I looked up, the owner of the range and his best friend were in tears. They were so moved. And they said, this was the most beautiful thing I've ever heard. And one of the men, these big, burly, strong, like bear-looking men, came up to me, cuffing tears off of his cheek before they ran into his grizzly beard. And he pressed into my hand some tokens. And he said, this is from me and the boys. We're so grateful for what you did. And they gave me more free rounds at the range because everyone loved it so much. And that was such a sweet experience because I didn't even think what I had to give was of any value to them. But I thought, it's the only thing I have. So I'm going to give it with all the sincerity of my heart. And not only did they appreciate it, but it deeply moved them. And then they, in turn, were motivated to give a token of gratitude back to me, which deeply opened and touched my heart. And you can see how this just becomes a snowball effect. Like a tiny little snowball launched off the side of a mountain peak that gathers momentum and draws other snow into itself before suddenly it becomes a great avalanche. And that's what gratitude can be in our lives. It was such a fun experience for me. And so even if it's not finances that you have an abundance of in your life, surely God has given you gifts. Surely you can share them creatively, intelligently, and with deep sincerity. And the more you do that, just find out. Just find out what it'll do to your consciousness, what it'll do to your perception of life. It's a wonderful thing. I had a friend in Los Angeles, have a friend in Los Angeles who's a really fun man and a profound one. And one of the things I enjoy most about him is he puts his money where his mouth is, meaning that if he believes something and he talks a philosophy, he'll test it out in the cold light of day and see if he's really up to the task. And he talks about he was a proponent of generosity and the necessity of giving to make a meaningful life. And he's an actor and an artist and a very refined person. And he was touring the country doing a one-man show that he had written based on his brother's combat journal from his brother's deployment in Afghanistan, actually. It's a very interesting show. But at any rate, he was performing this show, and afterwards, when he came out to meet and greet the audience, I need to pause for a second and say, one of the first things you notice about my friend is his intoxicatingly charming smile and his laughter and his brightly, keenly interested, kind eyes. But probably the third thing on the list that you'll notice about him is he wears this incredible pair of handmade leather boots that are just perfect. They're just perfect. And not only are they perfect, but they're perfect on him. Like, they look like God had him in mind when he made that pair of boots. They're like a match made in heaven. And he's from Georgia, and the way he walks in those boots, the way he stands in those boots, it's just, they were made for one another. So at any rate, he said he came out after this one-man show, and he was meet and greeting everybody, and he was talking, and there was a person who he had never met before, because he's in a different state or what have you, and the person was talking to him, and the person said, "Oh my God, I love your boots." And without missing a beat, my friend said, "Oh, you like them? Here, try them on." And he took the boots off his own feet and said, "Just try them on, see if they fit you." And the guy thinking, oh, well, maybe if they do fit, I'll go get my own pair. And he tried them on, and they fit like a glove. And my friend, standing there in his socks, said, "They're yours. Take them." And the man said, "But I don't even know you." And my friend said, "I don't care. They fit you. Take them. Take them with my love. They're yours." And the person kept resisting. And my friend actually said, the funny thing is I have 2 pairs. I bought 2. Because I liked them so much, I thought I might as well buy a second in case the first ones wear out. But they're still pretty new, so take them. They're yours. I've got another one at home. And that's exactly the attitude that this prayer from Whispers from Eternity is presenting. Teach me to spend for others as I spend for myself. He's not even saying, teach me to spend for others and deny spending for myself, but just to think equally of the needs of others as I do for myself, which my friend in that moment did. I have 2 pairs of boots. You love it. It fits you. Take it. I have 1 extra. I don't need 2 pairs. I don't have 4 feet. So take it. And every time my friend told that story of giving his shoes off of his feet to somebody else, he lit up with so much joy and laughter. And he would have an entire room laughing with so much soul joy. Because that would be his way to entice people, to drop the gauntlet, to say, this is what is possible. We have that saying, oh, he'd give you the shirt off his own back. Well, my friend literally gave the shoes off his own feet to somebody. Have you ever done that? I haven't. But now that I've heard that story, I'm keeping my eyes out. We'll see. I think it would be fun. It's fun to test the boundaries of our own generosity and to see what we're really capable of. So now I will read more of this prayer from Whispers from Eternity. It's a bit of a long one, which is why I didn't begin with it straight away. But the essence of it is what I read at the beginning. So now this is, teach me to spend for others as I spend for myself. And taking the joyful, self-expanding feeling that we've been cultivating over the last minutes, let's interiorize that feeling now into the heart, and that aspiration, that soul desire to feel ourselves not limited by this personality, not limited by this cage of bones and flesh, but to feel our heart beating within the hearts of all of our brothers, sisters, everywhere. Let's offer that aspiration up to the brain, to the spiritual eye, to the feet of the infinite, as we pray together. If through thy grace I have more wealth than others, teach me to share the surplus with those who have less, or even nothing. For thou art in the poor as much as in the rich. In giving wealth to the rich, thou gavest it to thyself. But wealth is not only a blessing, it is also a test to see whether people, having received that blessing, will also be rich enough in compassion to share what they have with those who are less fortunate. The blessed who care not for the unblessed, and the fortunate who care not for the unfortunate, will never feel thy deeper blessings in their lives. Blinded by their own selfish opulence, rather, they will be required by law to be poor again, that they may see that thou dwellest equally, and sometimes even more openly, in the homes of the poor. The unfeeling rich must experience poverty again and be stripped of their comforts, that they may feel the pinch of others' wants as their own. Blessed are those who share thy abundance with others. Riches were given to them that they might learn to give to others. Those, however, who keep useful treasures locked away, mildewed and rusting, or simply unknown, when man's duty is to make this world better and more beautiful, they are like cobras, sitting protectively over a hoard of jewels which serve them nothing. The magnitude of their misery is rendered all the more gross by the fact that so many of their brothers are wailing by the wayside for help. Misers will die in the much more grinding poverty of a dry, shriveled soul. To die rich without having shared anything is really to die poor, and to pass the portals of death willingly impoverished by having gladly shared with others is to die truly rich. Teach us, Lord, to feel consideration for those who have lost their wealth or their health. Teach us to feel even more for them than we would for any loss of our own. If we shrink at the thought of becoming poor ourselves, teach us by empathy to sympathize even more with those who are already being ground under the wheels of material want of any kind. Teach us to spend as happily and freely for others as we spend for ourselves. Teach us not to love thy gifts more than thee, the true giver of all gifts. For to think more of thy gifts than of thee is to separate ourselves from thee. Those who share thy gifts freely with others, even as thou sharest the gift of life and consciousness with them, find themselves one with the life and consciousness of all. So this is the goal, friends. Let us practice giving of ourselves freely in every circumstance, sharing the talents that God has given us, as in that parable from the Bible, and also the wealth that He has bestowed upon us. But also remember that as this whispers itself even says, your wealth is not just your material prosperity, but it's all the blessings that God has bestowed upon you. So whatever you have an abundance of, wherever God has touched your life, and He surely has touched somewhere, give from that point and watch it expand ever joyfully to encompass a greater and greater part of your consciousness until, like St. Philip Neri, our hearts burst open in compassion for God in every heart.